Ryan here with Dark Rangers Inc. And now that it's 2024, I felt like it was about time to do a new processing workflow. And when I say new, more just an update. A lot of new tools have come out over the last several months, and I really haven't put out a new processing video in a while. So today we're pretty much going to go start to finish on some great Telescope Live data. They are a partner of the channel, and I am one of their official tutors. I haven't mentioned them in a while, but with all these cloudy nights that are killing everybody right now with El Nino, there is no better time to take advantage of their data, especially for folks that maybe are on the verge of transitioning into monochrome. Why not jump ahead? I really wish I would have thought of this years ago before I made the switch. It would have made transitioning so much more enjoyable. And if you're just looking to work with filters or scopes or skies and targets that maybe you can't access right now, it is a really cost-effective and great way to continue to hone and sharpen your skills. So I'm excited to share some new tools with you today. Sasha from A View into Space actually came out with a video earlier this week that went over some of these tools, but we will be going through the entire workflow. I encourage you to check out his channel as well. He talks about a lot of the same things that I do, as does Luca Manico and DSO Imager. So many great channels out there, but I don't want you guys to feel like you constantly have to keep up to date with every new process that comes out. It feels like every week there's something new. And just remember, guys, people have been making APOD winning images for many years now, long before we had these one-button AI tools. And so if you have a workflow that's working with you right now, don't feel like you constantly have to change it and learn a brand new way. And hey, this tool came out, or there's an update, and now do I do this first before this? And is it a two-step process now and a one-step process? I see people kind of freak out. Try out the new tool. If it works and it adds to your experience or makes it easier or better, adopt it. If not, don't worry about it. I'm actually going to be sharing some tools that I'm actually taking a step back on the newest version, because after using it now on several images, I'm finding that some of the older processes are actually a little bit more consistent for me. But maybe for you and your equipment, your skies, your conditions, the other option might work better. So I never want to tell you guys the right way to do things. I'm just showing you what is kind of currently working for me and what's out there. So hopefully it helps you guys. And before we jump into Pixinsight, I just wanted to say one thing. We had our first live call with our Patreon community this last Saturday, and way more people showed up than I thought. And our little private Facebook community has grown to over 30 people. And so I really would encourage you to think about joining. It's a phenomenal group of people. It's really kind of reinvigorating the hobby for me. I was kind of burning out there towards the end of the year. I didn't really take a holiday break from YouTube, but helping all these guys and interacting and seeing what they're doing and doing our one-on-one coaching, it's really reinvigorated me. And so if you want to be a part of an awesome community that's really supportive and going to give you a lot of great knowledge and help and allow you to give back as well, check out the link in the description. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the Flaming Star and Tadpoles in Pixinsight. All right, guys, here we are in Pixinsight. We have our SHO channels here. And if you're using a color camera, don't worry. I'm going to kind of differentiate where the steps so you can follow along as well. So it'll be kind of a workflow for everybody. And I'm going to be introducing some new tools that have just kind of come out and started to be used, but they're not all able to be used at once. And some of them are very similar to things that we've been using in Photoshop for a long time. So for those of you guys that have been debating making the switch, I don't think they are quite as good yet, but they are kind of a Photoshop clone tool, and they should make it a lot easier to bridge the gap and to do a lot more. So what I was able to get was something like this, and this was all done completely in Pixinsight. And so I'm just going to take you guys along through and hopefully come up with something like that. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and just combine the three channels, and we will just do the typical SHO combination for this one. All right, and now you might be saying, well, Ryan, why didn't you do linear fit first? Or I like to do linear fit first. Hang tight, because there is a specific reason for that, and I think you guys are really going to like it. Your life all just got quite a bit easier, and you will see why here shortly. All right, and then we have our pretty typical green kind of look here. We can unlink the STF here by clicking the chain and then hit the nuke button and get a little bit better idea of what we're actually working with. So obviously we want to clean that background up and kind of get rid of that. And so we're going to do, I'm going to show you guys why I am not going to stick with GraXpert for the time being. So whether we put it on 0 0 or 100. We'll put it on 50. I've tried it on both with this image. We'll just throw it in the middle just to kind of appease everybody. I have not been getting consistent results, unfortunately, at this point with GraXpert. I've tried it on Telescope Live data, my own data, the folks that I do one-on-one lessons with every week, and it does do a pretty good job sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. And so we'll show you what that looks like here. So this is really the look I've been getting, almost like an automatic background extraction. Again, sometimes it works good, but a lot of times I get something that looks like this, and I did try it at 0, 50, and 100, and unfortunately, the result was a little bit different, but it wasn't usable in all cases. So in my intro, I talked about how in some cases I was going with the classics, and this is one of those situations. So I am going to unlink the stretch again, just so I can see what's going on, so I can see where I put my spots, and we're going to do 2 for tolerance, 6 for shadow relaxation, and make the size a little bit bigger. Anywhere from 50 to 150 is pretty good. Subtraction and replace target image. And what I'm doing, of course, is, you guys know all this, is I'm looking for, areas that represent the background space without a ton of stars. And then we do obviously want to avoid the nebula. So I found that, the 2600s, this one is a 600M with Telescope Live, which is the same pixel as the 2600 or 6200. It's basically the QHY 6200, is not super picky with where you put the spots, but that should be good. Could have maybe put one more in the middle, but we're really just looking to get rid of that bright Slimer green, for those of you the Ghostbusters fan in us all, what it is that we got rid of, and that's exactly what we wanted to get rid of. And then we'll do a link stretch here, and as you can see, that does a much nicer job than the GraXpert did. Now, unfortunately, we have the all green look, and that's because the HA is much stronger than the other 2 channels, and so we have this auto linear fit, which is just awesome, and we can go by the lowest mean, so we don't have to do statistics. We don't have to do math. We don't have to do anything. You'll see RGB, it extracts them, it analyzes them, it linear fits them, and it puts it back together. So this is a huge win. I'm really pumped on this. I did test this versus regular linear fit, and this actually, for me at least, has done a great job. So for all you monochrome guys out there, we can all rejoice. This is a very happy day for all of us. All right, there we go. It did its thing. I'll go ahead and re-STF it. And now you'll be able to see, even with a linked STF, it shouldn't look all green. We should have some of those nice blues and other colors, and we do. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of a weird kind of funky outline. Just do the 24-bit up here. 24-bit will smooth that out, and that will go away when we stretch. One thing I am going to do first, and I did, this was auto-cropped, so that wasn't the reason why GraXpert didn't work. Crop this in a little bit. Go ahead and do that. And I want to do that before I go ahead and extract the stars. And then now that we have done our combination and all of our channels are even, now we would do blur exterminator. And if you had a color camera and you were doing broadband, you would want to do the correct only before SPCC, and then after you've done SPCC, you can finish it off. This is not an exact analogy, but linear fit is kind of like the monochrome SPCC, because we're kind of doing our color correction to some extent, but we want to do blur exterminator now before we do narrowband normalization or anything like that, and we definitely want to do it with linear. I actually hopped on my first phone call with Adam Block this last week, and he did confirm that blur exterminator at 100% linear. It's not actually even doing deconvolution if you're doing it post-stretch. So it will still sharpen your image, but there's better ways to sharpen a non-linear image. It has to be linear for blur exterminator to truly do its job. So for color after SPCC, for narrowband after you have combined them and the channels are equal. So if you do linear fit, then combine it, go ahead and do blur exterminator. Or if you do it this way, I would equalize the channels with the auto linear fit, and then we're basically at ground zero in both cases to run blur exterminator before we do any real color changing. All right, that's wrapping up, and I just did 20 on the sharpened stars and 70, fairly normal setting. We can kind of zoom in and see we've got some nice details. There's our little guys. I think this is only shot at 380 millimeters, so pretty good detail, and this looks nice. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and do star exterminator, and then I'll go ahead and run noise exterminator. All right, there we go. We've got our stars, and they're those beautiful magenta stars. We will fix those later. I know there are some pixel mask scripts you can do to kind of simulate RGB stars, but if I really want those, I typically will just go ahead and shoot them. I will show you how to get them pretty good looking though. There's an easy way to get rid of the magenta, and then there still is some nice star color that kind of remains afterwards. So I'm going to run noise exterminator here real quick and then just get it ready to jump into GHS for our stretch. All right, that's wrapping up, and as you can see, it's looking pretty good. The data looks really nice. There's good details in there. You know, it's nice. I like this little nebula over here too. So very cool. So what we'll do is we will go ahead and grab our generalized hyperbolic stretch. And you know I've shown this several times and it's constantly evolving. There's so many different ways to kind of look at this. I'm going to go ahead and just pick a spot here in the background, send that to symmetry point. We will turn off our STF and turn on our preview. And then like always, we will go ahead and give it a stretch. And then once I get it to about here, I'm going to take the local intensity. So we'll probably take that to about 6. And you can see how narrow this little needle of data is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the local intensity to kind of widen that out so we have a little bit more data to kind of work with and play with as we continue to stretch. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And in a lot of the one-on-ones I've been doing, we've been going with this dark to light method because GHS does seem to be kind of the thing that most people are still struggling with. And one of the areas is like not knowing how to pick the symmetry points. So we've just picked the complete background. So now I'm going to pick this like nebula right here. That's like kind of where the black and the light nebula kind of meet each other. So it's a very faint nebula, and I'm going to send that to symmetry point, and we will work our way into brighter and brighter, which will essentially move the symmetry point further and further to the right. And so we can go ahead and do this first one. We need to probably bump it just a hair to the right, and we'll go ahead and do that. One more thing you can do too, and I know other YouTube channels have talked about this, if it helps you to visualize, if you want to go into linear from generalized hyperbolic and go ahead and drag that to the right to kind of get the black point a little bit more realistic so that you can see it develop, that's totally fine. Like I said though, as we pick symmetry points that are further and further to the right, it will push the histogram further and further to the left, which will kind of solve that problem for us. So since we picked a really faint area, now I'm going to pick a little bit brighter area, let's say like right in there. That's kind of the low to mid level nebula brightness. And I'm going to go there next with a little bit of stretch and then probably a little bit more local intensity. You can see before and after. And then we can kind of check to see, are we anywhere close to blowing out? We're not. We're, 0.5, 0.6, so we've got plenty of room there. I'll go ahead and apply it. And the nice thing is with preview on, we can kind of see what would happen if we did that exact same stretch again. Obviously, that's not what we want to do. We want it to start getting darker. So in order to do that, I'm going to pick a brighter spot for the symmetry point. So we kind of pick this mid-level nebula, and now we can kind of maybe go for another area we want to define and separate, and maybe this, like a ridge like right here, somewhere in that region, and send that to symmetry. And now it should maybe get a little bit brighter in some areas, but maybe add a little contrast as well. And as you can see, it just immediately made that level, that kind of just above middle level brightness pop. So we have the before and after. And it just did a really nice job. I don't want to kind of overdo it. I'd rather do it in small layers than try to go for really big stretches. I know everybody wants to do things fast and simple and as short as steps as possible, but I do find that layering it kind of helps. So now when we're at this stage, we don't necessarily need to hit reset. What I could do is either just pick a new symmetry point. So I could pick like this bright area here, or maybe somewhere, a little bit darker than that, send that to symmetry point. That's a good option. The other thing you could do is, I think the symmetry point was, ballpark in this area. You can just start working it to the right. As we pick a brighter spot, see where the line is? If we pick a brighter spot, it's just moving to the right. So we can either pick one on here and send it, or I can kind of drag it to taste. We're getting to the point where, we don't really have much further to go. And so let's see how that looks before, after. And, I'm basically just leaving the same stretch that we had before. and just kind of adjusting the symmetry point. And then you can see what would happen if we applied the same one again. Let's see if we just take the symmetry point a little further. And yeah, gives us even a little bit more contrast. We're kind of right on that first quartile, before and after. Might be a little bit more than we want, before, after. And I think we'll go ahead and apply that. Again, I probably could have done this in 2 or 3, but for me, I just tend to kind of like to do it in layers. So now I'm just going to apply a little bit, and then yeah, let's pick like the brightest of the bright point right there, send that to symmetry, and this should pretty much be our final stretch. And as you can see, it is adjusting that black point, which is why I don't worry too much about doing it right away. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. I think that looks good. I like to have a little bit of room on the dark side so you can see, you know, we're at like 0.19. I like to be between like 0.15 and 0.19 after the stretch. That way, if I want to add a curves, an S-curve, something like that, and we end up darkening the image, I don't start clipping the data. We'll go back to GHS. Sorry, I forgot about this last little trick, is if you did want to just go ahead, if you didn't want to go into curves, you could go into linear, and then obviously, let me turn the preview on. By going to the right here in linear, you can find the darkest you can go before you clip. So you see how that turned into a 1, and if I keep going, that number grows. That's a pixel of clipping. So basically right there, that is the darkest I can go with the background. If I go there, I'm clipping a pixel. So that would be the darkest I go, and you can do the same thing on this end by seeing how high, and then boom, you can see I'm starting to clip pixels. So basically there, this would be the most dynamic range I could get. It would kind of act like doing a little bit of an S-curve. I'm maybe not going to go as far as I could with it. I'm going to go a little bit lighter with the background. But that's one way you can get a little bit more dynamic range. It's, in a nutshell, kind of like doing an S-curve. We're dragging this side this way, which is darkening that, and then we're bringing up that side. Basically a diagonal type of S-curve motion, but I guess not technically an S-curve. Similar effect to an S-curve. I know you guys in the comment section like to be very official. All right, and so now if we want to start narrowband normalization, obviously we are going to work in SHO. If you had a dual narrowband filter, you'd go ahead and choose HOO, and we'll go ahead and turn the preview on. As you can see, it does a nice job introducing a little bit some reds and golds, and this is what it would look like fresh out of the tool. So it turns some of those green areas into orange, and we can change the lightness mode from off to preserve to HA. And HA gives us a little bit more contrast. I actually kind of like the preserve. It's a smoother transition from darks to lights. And then I don't think we really need an O3 blue, boost because we've got plenty of blue. Let's see if we give S2, if we go to like 1.1. We'll go to like 1.05. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to jump into probably the coolest tool that I'm most excited about. It's still not as easy to use in here as it is in Photoshop. Part of that could be experience. The other part, I think, is just how fast it works in real-time preview mode. But what we'll do is we'll go into our script toolbox, and you would have all these tools if you already have the GraXpert. I think I said that earlier, but just in case I didn't. And the selective color correction is in there. And this is a tool that is in Photoshop, and if you have Photoshop and haven't gotten my full-length tutorial on Photoshop, it is a really good way to get good at Photoshop quickly if you do want to make the dive. The link is in the description. So selective color is a really cool thing because I know in the past, those of you guys that stay in Pixinsight, which I don't, guys like Luca Matico are fantastic at showing you how to get the most out of color in Pixinsight. I always just wave the white flag and go to Photoshop, but he does it with a lot of color masks. And so as you can see, we've got masking and we have all the different colors. And so if we look at red and we do show mask, it's going to show us all the areas red. Obviously green is very heavy. So if we go into green, we'll see all the areas where there is green. And you can even adjust the mask if you want to. Like if you want to, you know, take down the highlights, and then that way only the darker areas are masked. you have full customization on that. But let's go back to red. Now, the way this works in Photoshop, and it works exactly the same way here, is it's basically kind of how, what would happen if you added more cyan to red or took it away. So if you take away the cyan in an image with red, it's going to tend to give more red. So see how the red kind of pops out more in those areas. If you add magenta, it'll take it a little bit more towards kind of like a more intense red, almost like a pinkish red. Same with yellow, it'll take it more towards orange, yellow. So basically, you can see kind of the effect that it does, and it's pretty strong. So you want to be careful with this. You're not going to be whaling the slider all the way over, hopefully. But I do kind of want to warm this up a little bit, so I might take away a little cyan, maybe add a little bit of yellow as well, just to kind of brighten it up a little bit, and then maybe a little magenta. And then if we wanted to, we could add, if you add red, obviously to red, essentially that's just going to increase the saturation. And you kind of get the point. So you can go through and play with this. You can see, like, if I subtract a bunch of blue, what is it going to do? It's going to, kind of turn it into a little bit different shade of red. If I add a bunch of blue to the red areas, it kind of makes it more of a purple, right? If you add a bunch of blue to red, we've got a bunch of purple coming out. So you can see it's kind of more how the colors play together, the interplay. Think of red, green, and blue kind of like a three-legged stool, and this is going to be how they really interact with each other. So you can go through each color individually. That's how I'd recommend. And then they have shadows, midtones, and highlights. And it would take me a really long time to kind of go through this with each one, but I wanted to give you the gist. So you can see shadows, show mask. And again, obviously adjust that. Shadows is really technically more the areas that aren't background, but like the darker areas that actually have color. So all this orange area and stuff like that. So if we wanted to make this orange a little bit less green and yellow and more red, we could bump the red up, and we could maybe subtract a little green. And you can kind of see, how quickly you have to be pretty subtle with the midtones, shadows, and highlights. You have a little bit more wiggle room with the actual colors themselves. And so what I did is I just kind of went through all of those different things. The luminance is obviously going to brighten it up. So if I want to brighten up the midtones, I could bump up the luminance, or excuse me, the shadows. Shadows is selected. That's essentially the selective color tool. Definitely one you just kind of have to play around with and get used to. It's one that I'm actually really familiar with because of Photoshop, so I kind of understand the interplay between the colors. You'll get the hang of it with time, and it'll kind of be second nature. When it comes to combining the stars, I'm still just using the screen star script, but there also is a combine images that you can do, and you can choose the screen method. This is kind of like layers in Photoshop. It has different blend modes, so you can do similar blend modes just like Photoshop. So combine image is another way to do that, but I just still like the good old screen stars. It seems to be faster for me. And then so I would take image 58 and then image 58 stars once I stretch them and put them together. Now the one way that I've been stretching stars that you guys will probably laugh at me for this, but it's fairly simple, and it's gives me pretty good results. I don't use one of the automatic stretching scripts. I just go into histogram transformation, and I show this to a lot of people that I coach just because it's easy and controllable. I give it kind of like a mid-tone stretch about like that, and I just apply it a few times, and then on the third or fourth one, typically, I just kind of fine tune. And I find just stretching from the mid-tone gives you, like a really nice result that's, pretty controllable. And so after usually 3 of the stretches, I'm kind of right in the money. And then it's just a matter of kind of fine tuning on that last one so that I just get a little bit of a glow on some of the bigger stars, and the smaller stars are still pretty sharp. So we'll go with something like that. And then really quickly, I'll show you, the very easy way to get rid of magenta stars. Most of you guys probably have a good idea how to do this. You're going to do Control-I, which inverts, or Command-I, and you can see when you invert magenta, what do you get? You get green. Well, we all know how to get rid of green. We run some SCNR. Now, the cool thing is once we do this, you're usually left with, still some orangish red, yellow stars and some blue stars, even though they are completely false color, right? This is not an RGB image, it's SHO. But you can see we have some blue stars, and so yeah, there's an orange one right there, and so that they don't look bad, and you don't have that horrible magenta. You got some nice blue ones in there, so they look pretty decent. And then yeah, I do the screen star method, and then I really just kind of played around with the selective color, and then just a little bit of work in curves. And this is kind of what I walked away with. So, could I have gotten maybe a little bit better image in Photoshop? Perhaps, but this is definitely better than I would have been able to get before, because I don't work with all those masks like some other people do. But using that selective color tool, you really can do a nice job. So it'll work for narrowband and mono, and so hopefully that's really helpful. It's ever evolving though, and really my point was just to kind of show you guys a little bit of an overview of what I'm doing right now, some of those new tools, so that you can go out and try it. And again, that toolbox feature, if you've done GraXpert and you've installed it, it's in toolbox, and there are more than we're even talking about. So create Hubble palette from one shot color. I haven't actually gone in and played with this yet, so it's in here, and check it out. I'm sure somebody will do a video on it on the near future, but since I was doing a monochrome image, didn't make sense for this workflow. So guys, hopefully that's helpful. And I know this was a little bit longer one, but I really wanted to kind of go through fairly start to finish and highlight some new tools along the way, so we can kind of see what's going on here with the start of 2024. So if you haven't checked out the Patreon group, I'd recommend it. Like I said, if you are looking to do Photoshop, check out the link for my full-length tutorial. And guys, if you're still not using Telescope Live, make that a thing you do in 2024. There's no sense in letting your skills dull and not sharpen them during these cloudy skies. And until the next one, guys, as always, please, for the love of God, clear skies.